It's heavy shit.
Man, what?
Hold on, wait, watch out.
They need to make a documentary about this stuff. It's so much. How is it so much on the wall right there?
You see?
Do y'all see over there? Look at all the walls. Got doodle all on the walls.
Hold on.
Like, I'm confused.
Hold on, let me get a...
Bro, I'm so disgusted.
It's not open. It's not open. I wouldn't even want to go in there.
Go right there so they can see right there. Really? Oh my God, this is horrible.
In the depths of an Indianapolis winter, silence can be more terrifying than any sound. Some silences speak of loss so profound, they shatter the very fabric of human compassion. January 25, 2025. A date that would expose the darkest corners of human neglect. A day when a 2-year-old girl named Skylar Gardner became more than a victim. She became a symbol of a system's devastating failure. Her story is not just about a single tragic moment, it's about the invisible suffering of children hidden behind closed doors, about the thin line between neglect and murder, about a society that looks away until it's too late. Skylar Gardner, a name that would soon echo through courtrooms, headlines, and the collective conscience of Indianapolis. Her short life would become a cry for justice, a wake-up call to a community that had failed its most vulnerable. How could a mother abandon her child? How could a system designed to protect children fail so catastrophically? And most importantly, how many other Skylars are out there, waiting to be seen? This is the story of Skylar Gardner, a tragedy that would shock America and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about child abuse, neglect, and our collective responsibility. Darkness has many forms. Some are visible, like the filth that consumed Skylar Gardner's world. Some are invisible, like the complete absence of human care. This wasn't just an apartment. It was a crime scene waiting to be discovered, a perfect storm of neglect, despair, and human failure. Every surface told a story of abandonment so complete, it defied imagination. Tiny fragments of childhood lay buried, a doll with missing eyes, a broken toy car, coloring books never completed. These were the ghosts of moments stolen, of childhood dreams crushed beneath mountains of garbage and indifference. The walls spoke a language of trauma. Smeared with feces, covered in layers of grime, they were silent witnesses to a nightmare that had become Skylar's entire existence. This wasn't just dirt. This was systematic destruction of human dignity. A forensic expert's voice echoes briefly, adding clinical perspective. In 20 years of investigations, I've never witnessed an environment so comprehensively destroyed. Survival here meant more than just breathing. It meant navigating a landscape of survival so brutal, so inhumane, that every breath was a battle against complete erasure. Rot wasn't just physical, it was emotional, it was systemic. Each piece of garbage, each smear of filth represented a moment of abandonment, a choice made to destroy rather than nurture. His apartment was more than a crime scene. It was an indictment of a mother who abandoned her children, of a system that failed to protect them, of a society that looks away until tragedy screams for attention. Skylar's world was not a home. It was a prison of neglect, a testament to the most profound betrayal a child can experience, being forgotten by the very person meant to protect her. Some dreams are poison. For Chantel Gardner, ambition was a predator that would consume everything in its path, especially motherhood. Fame wasn't just a goal, it was an escape, a desperate transformation from struggling young mother to aspiring rapper, each post a brick in a wall separating her from the brutal reality of her children's existence. Her digital footprint told a story more complex than any rap lyrics. Text messages became breadcrumbs of neglect, hours stretched into days, days into weeks of increasing distance. Brian Thomas wasn't just a boyfriend, he was a lifeline, a promise of escape from the suffocating weight of motherhood. In the brutal mathematics of her choices, her children became subtraction. Freedom was her only addition. Audio from police interviews plays, her voice raw and conflicted. Chantel continues, I just needed to breathe. The apartment was too much. I couldn't be there all the time. Those words were not an explanation. They were an indictment, a confession of a mother who had already emotionally abandoned her children long before that fatal winter night. Connie B lived for likes, for views, for momentary validation, but in that pursuit she lost something far more precious. She lost her humanity, she lost her children. This wasn't just a story of bad parenting. This was a systemic failure, a young woman so lost in her own aspirations that she could no longer see the lives depending on her. Skylar and her brother weren't children to Chantel. They were obstacles, inconveniences. In the end, Chantel Gardner became more than a mother who failed. She became a symbol of dreams that consume, of ambitions that destroy, of a society that can look away until tragedy screams for attention. I know this was a heavy one, but these stories need to be told. If you're feeling it, give this video a thumbs up and share it to spread awareness. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our true crime community. For those of you who've been here a while, you know I appreciate you. Thanks for sticking around. In the darkest stories of human failure, there are no innocent bystanders. Brian Thomas was not just a witness to tragedy, he was an architect of neglect. Brian Thomas wasn't a monster by traditional definition. He was something far more dangerous, a man who understood exactly what was happening and chose silence. Complicity wears many masks, and his was calculated indifference. Their digital footprint told a story more sinister than simple romance. Each message, each hidden interaction was a calculated step away from responsibility. Brian knew. He always knew. His initial story was a carefully constructed facade. I didn't know, he claimed. I wasn't even around. But digital breadcrumbs speak louder than convenient lies. Phone records painted a different picture: constant communication, shared locations, mutual understanding of a reality that condemned 2 children to a living hell. The legal system saw through his fabrications. Assisting a criminal, 2 cold words that encompassed a profound betrayal. Brian Thomas wasn't just an observer, he was an enabler. Their relationship wasn't love, it was a transaction. Chantel provided an escape from conventional responsibility. Brian provided validation for her most destructive impulses. Every moment he remained silent was another moment Skylar and her brother suffered. Every text message, every shared laugh, every intentional look away, these were acts of violence disguised as indifference. Legal expert commentary appears briefly. Legally, his actions might seem passive. Morally, they were a death sentence. Brian Thomas became more than Chantel's boyfriend. He became a symbol of how easily human beings can normalize horror, how systematically we can choose not to see. In the anatomy of this tragedy, Brian wasn't just a supporting character. He was a critical organ, pumping indifference through a system already failing its most vulnerable. Some stories are written in whispers. Skylar Gardner's final days were a silent scream that no one heard. She was more than a victim, more than a statistic. She was a child whose entire universe had been systematically reduced to a prison of neglect. Her body told a story medical charts could never fully capture. Each bruise, each sign of malnutrition was a silent testimony to hours of unwitnessed suffering. Time stopped having meaning, days blended into nights, food became a distant memory, warmth a forgotten comfort. Skylar's world had become a countdown, not to birthdays or milestones, but to survival. The autopsy was more than a medical document. It was an indictment of a mother who abandoned her, of a system that failed her, of a society that looked away until it was too late. Hypothermia doesn't just steal warmth, it steals hope. Each degree drop was a betrayal, her own body fighting a battle no 2-year-old should ever face. Her final hours weren't just moments of physical suffering, they were a profound emotional abandonment, a child's understanding that the world had forgotten her. In those last days, Skylar wasn't just dying, she was experiencing a complete erasure of childhood, of safety, of love, of basic human compassion. She became more than a victim, she became a silent witness to the most profound betrayal a child can experience. a memory that would demand justice. In the shadows of unspeakable tragedy, one life remained, a small, resilient witness to a nightmare most adults could never comprehend. It was more than Skylar's brother. He was a survivor, a child who managed to endure where his sister could not, a living testament to human resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. Trauma doesn't announce itself, it whispers. It seeps into the smallest spaces of a child's understanding, reshaping their entire perception of safety, of love, of human connection. His mind became a battlefield, not of wars fought with weapons, but of survival strategies, developed in a world where care was a foreign concept. Every moment was a negotiation with fear. Professionals who would later examine him understood something profound. His survival was not just physical. It was an act of extraordinary psychological resilience. He carried memories no child should possess, fragments of a life lived in perpetual survival mode. Sounds, smells, silences that spoke louder than any words. Healing would not be a destination, it would be a journey. Each therapy session, each moment of human connection, a small rebellion against the darkness of his early years. In him lived the most powerful response to tragedy, not revenge, not bitterness, but the simple, revolutionary act of surviving, of potentially thriving. His story was not over, it was just beginning, a narrative of hope, written one moment of recovery at a time. Justice is not a destination, it's a journey through the most intricate landscapes of human morality. The Marion County Courthouse became more than a building. It transformed into a stage where societal values would be tested, where a child's life would be measured against human failure. Murder, neglect, two words that could never fully capture the depth of what Chantel Gardner had done. The law sought to quantify an unquantifiable betrayal. This wasn't a simple case of guilt or innocence. It was an excavation of systemic failures, a surgical examination of how society creates and then abandons its most vulnerable. Each piece of evidence was a fragment of Skylar's stolen life. Phone records, apartment photographs, medical reports. They weren't just documents, they were posthumous witnesses. 12 individuals carried the weight of judgment, not just for Chantel, but for a system that allowed such profound neglect to exist unnoticed. The prosecution didn't just seek punishment, they sought accountability. A message that would echo beyond this courtroom, that childhood is sacred and its violation is unforgivable. In the brutal arithmetic of legal proceedings, Skylar was more than a victim. She became a catalyst, a name that would demand systemic change. Justice is never perfect, it's a human attempt to restore balance in a world perpetually tilted towards chaos. Some verdicts are read, some are felt. This was a verdict that would resonate in the collective consciousness, a line drawn in the sand between societal indifference and human accountability. Sentencing is where law meets human tragedy, where cold legal language attempts to measure the immeasurable depth of a crime. The moment hung suspended, a breath between judgment and consequence. Chantel Gardner stood, not as a mother, but as a defendant whose actions had erased a child's entire existence. Guilty. Two syllables that carried the weight of Skylar's stolen life. Murder. Neglect. Words that could never fully capture the profound betrayal of motherhood. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about drawing a line in society's moral landscape, declaring that some failures are too catastrophic to be forgiven. Prison sentences measure time, but how do you measure the lifetime stolen from a child? The moments Skylar would never experience, first days of school, first loves, dreams unrealized. Years became more than numerical punishment. They became a society's attempt to balance an impossible equation of loss. In this courtroom, Skylar became more than a victim. She became a standard, a benchmark, against which we would measure our collective responsibility to protect the most vulnerable. Grief is a language with no consistent dialect. Indianapolis spoke it in vigils, in whispers, in collective moments of stunned silence. Skylar's story wasn't just her own anymore. She had become a mirror reflecting community failures, a catalyst that demanded uncomfortable conversations about child protection. People who had never met Skylar found themselves mourning, not just a child lost, but the collective innocence that allows such tragedies to occur unnoticed. Digital memorials transformed into action platforms. Each share, each comment became a commitment, a promise that Skylar's story would not dissolve into statistical anonymity. Support wasn't performative, it was transformative. Community centers, child protection agencies, counseling services all found themselves reimagining their roles. This wasn't about blame, this was about collective responsibility, about creating protective ecosystems where no child falls through societal cracks. As Skylar became more than a victim, she became a watershed moment where collective grief transformed into collective action. Prevention is not a destination, it's a continuous, vigilant journey of human compassion. Skylar's story was never meant to be a memorial. It was a blueprint, a stark, uncompromising map of where society's protective systems must evolve. Protecting children isn't about complex bureaucracies. It's about creating human networks of observation, intervention, and immediate action. Every neighbor becomes a guardian, every teacher a potential lifeline, every community member a first responder in the most critical emergency, a child's survival. Education transforms potential tragedy. Understanding warning signs isn't just professional training, it's a moral imperative. Recognizing neglect before it becomes fatal. Phone call. One moment of courage. These can become the difference between continued suffering and immediate protection. Skylar's legacy would not be her tragedy. It would be the lives saved, the children protected, the systems fundamentally reimagined because her story demanded transformation. Memory is not about preservation, it's about transformation. Skylar Nicole Gardner was more than her final moments. She was laughter, she was potential, she was a universe of possibilities, violently interrupted. In her short life, she experienced a world that should have been filled with wonder. Instead, she knew only survival. Her existence became a silent testimony to systemic failures. She would not be defined by her tragedy. She would be remembered as a catalyst, a name that would echo through child protection conversations, a symbol of why vigilance matters. Skylar's legacy was never about her death. It was about the lives that might be saved because her story demanded we look closer, care deeper, protect more fiercely. Lives are measured not by years lived, but by impact created. Skylar's impact would reverberate far beyond her brief existence. In the architecture of human tragedy, Skylar's story is not an endpoint. It's an urgent punctuation mark, a demand for collective awakening. We are not passive witnesses. We are architects of change. Every child's life hangs in a delicate balance between protection and potential destruction. This is not about blame, this is about responsibility, about creating a world where no child's life becomes a footnote in a systemic failure. Skylar Gardner became more than a victim, she became a universal voice demanding that we look closer, care deeper, act immediately. In the end, her legacy is not written in courtrooms or legal documents, it's written in the lives we choose to protect, in the moments of intervention, in the courage to see and act. Compassion is not a passive emotion, it's an active, transformative force. This isn't about watching, this is about doing, about creating a world where no child's cry goes unheard, where no vulnerability becomes a death sentence. Call, one moment of courage. These can become the difference between continued suffering and immediate protection. Skylar's story does not end here. It begins with you, with every person willing to look closer, to listen deeper, to act immediately when a child's safety is at risk. We are not just witnesses. We are guardians of possibility, protectors of childhood's most fundamental right, to be safe, to be loved, to survive. Survivors aren't born, they're created, through collective action. Skylar's story isn't just a documentary, it's a lifeline waiting for your engagement. By sharing this video, you become more than a viewer, you become a guardian of hope. Click that share button, drop a comment that matters, subscribe to amplify voices that demand change. One click can create a ripple effect, protecting children who can't protect themselves. The National Child Abuse Hotline 1-800-4A-CHILD isn't just a number, It's a direct line to saving lives and survival. This isn't just content. This is a movement. This is how we honor Skylar. This is how we change everything.